Hi, I'm Paul, the MD of MAP, and I'm sat with Karen Forrest today.
Hi.
Hello, Karen. Karen's from Opsin. Her business is helping agencies, specifically digital agencies, with operations. So obviously lots of synergy between what we're both doing, what we both talk about, and I just thought it'd be really useful to ask you a few questions about the kind of the challenges that you see for agencies in terms of achieving operational efficiency, because obviously it's very close to my heart, because only by achieving that can you get the financial results that you want.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. That's okay?
That's great.
So you talk about the role of the operations director, whether that's in-house or outsourced. How do you define or explain the role of an operations director? What are they meant to be doing for the business?
I think it really depends on the size of the business, and I'll probably say it depends a lot throughout this conversation, because we've got some smaller people or smaller companies with 8 people in them. There might be a business with 60 people in them, and of course managing those takes very different skill sets, time and energy as well. But if we take on average, an agency, an ops director for me should definitely be part of the team that sets the strategy for the business, and then their job is very much about implementing that strategy internally, all moving parts that make business function, but also then making sure that they're doing it from the perspective of the agency, always looking after the agency's interests. What their specific skill set might be will depend on who's also sitting at that leadership table, who the MD or the founder is. If you've got a founder that's really financially astute and very hot on their finances, then you might have the ops director focusing more on the people, or focusing more on whether it be training or moving into business development and those kind of other sides of the operation. So it's a very fluid role, and it can cover lots of different things. I think really what you're looking for in that person is somebody who is very adaptable, somebody who's very resourceful, somebody who is not afraid to ask the difficult questions, and trying to put those solutions in place.
Yeah, I think you said to me when we spoke recently that a lot of people get confused with the job roles of like a production director or production manager versus an operations director encompasses that and more.
We'll have a person that they call an operations director or an operations manager, whose focus really is much more on what I would call the studio or the creative technical side of getting the product out of the
workflow,
of the industry, the workflow in some ways. I'm talking more about the agency operations. How does the agency operate as a profitable business, and all of the aspects that go into that. So for me, that covers off your processes, your systems. It covers off your client relationships and how you work with them, and the processes of how you get project out of the business itself, but not in terms of how you design it or how you lay it out, but the project management function, the financial management function, moving into people and how we manage them, and then finally moving over to business development from a new business perspective, but really also from an organic point of view.
So you need a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge to be a good operations director.
You need to be able to bend,
That's great. And how do you get operational people motivated and educated, understand what they need to do to perform from a commercial perspective?
I think education is absolutely the key there. You have to make sure that people understand what they do, how to do their job well, so that you can empower them, so that they know when they're making decisions, they're making it not only for what they're faced with in front of them, but that has an impact on the wider business. It's really important for me that if people can make their own decisions, know what good looks like, know how to be successful in their role, then it frees up everybody else around them. You don't want people to be a bottleneck, so you need your staff to be empowered. But then you have to really help them understand the little things that they do and how they have an impact. So for me, that's training, it's sharing information, it's discussing that really openly. It shouldn't be cloak and dagger. There's nothing to hide behind. The more they know, the more they can actually affect. So for me then it goes into whether it's internal training or little webinars or little videos that they can refer to. I'll give an example. I had a group of people say to me once, working on a project, that they needed more staff. And I could see that staff were working late. And I thought to myself, well, I don't understand why. So I said, well, talk me through what's happening. Well, we just haven't got enough people. So I said, well, I'd refer to the data I've got, because if I'm going to go and look for more staff, I need a business rationale for that. Why? And And I said to them, well, help me understand, because what I can see here is everybody's timesheets are 35 hours a week. So where's the extra time going? Well, I'm not putting time down to the job. Well, why aren't you putting time down to the job? Well, because there's not enough room in the budget to put time to the job. So it's like, okay, hang on, that's the red flag. Because what you're doing now is working for free, and you're coming to me to ask me to hire more people to come in and work alongside you for free. And really what we should be doing is going back to the drawing board and raising a flag to the client to say, this project's going out of scope, or we didn't estimate it properly in the first place. Let's deal with the problem and not just throw a load of solutions at it in terms of resource.
Yeah, and that's important, isn't it? Because you often get people focusing on the wrong, like you said, the wrong problem, really. They focus on the fact that we can't allocate time to this job because the client won't pay for it, rather than, well, actually, we just need to know how much time we're allocating to this job so that we can make better decisions going forward.
But also they're putting more pressure on themselves. So they're churning time that they're not being paid for. And every business needs to make money. So if the business isn't profitable, then actually their position's in jeopardy anyway. So let's educate them to understand how they can make what they do valuable to the business, valuable to the clients, and actually make their role stick around. Okay,
so I guess a close link to that is financial management of projects. From your experiences, when that has fallen down, I think you've just touched upon it now, which is about educating them in the first place. But just talk more about that. So when you've seen it done badly and you've seen it done well, what has been the differences in the way that it's been done?
I think always you've got to start with the scope. You have to get that scope right, be really clear on what is included and what isn't included, because that's your drawing board that you go back to whenever there's a discrepancy. That's what you're costing out to a client. So when they're asking you to do something else, actually we shouldn't feel guilty for saying that's not what we agreed. It can be done, everything can be done, but there's a time cost associated with that. So let's manage that properly. Communicate with the client. I've been in businesses where our proposals were quite hefty because the projects were quite large, 150, 250,000 pound projects. So the client didn't read it. Somebody's gone to the bottom line, procurement might have got involved, somebody's approved the cost, and they've largely looked at the different sections, but what they don't know is that there's 2 rounds of amends involved, and when we're getting to 3 and 4 and 5 rounds of amends on something, that can't be sustainable. So it's really spending the time with the client up front to say, let's be clear on what's in and what's not in, and actually telling them that you will flag to them if they're asking for something that's outside of scope. Not everything has to, they're not on the clock every minute of the second. You have to be able to be a bit flexible, but chunky additional requests have to be paid for.
Yeah, and that's about, like, people talk about not taking no for an answer. That's a bit like not taking yes for an answer. So just because the client says, yes, I agree, I want to go ahead, you're actually saying, well, hang on, before we do that, let's just be clear what it is you're agreeing to here. And I think the problem with a lot of agencies is that they're busy selling, so they're celebrating the sale without spending that extra bit of time to make sure that it's done in a robust way, then they're not going to trip up.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the next part as well, which is making sure internally you're prepared for this project. So sharing with the people who are going to work on that team exactly what the scope is. It might change, that's fine, but how much time has been allotted to them to do their work. Somebody should have been involved in that scoping in the first place anyway. That should never be done in isolation. But it might be a different person who's actually going to deliver it. So letting them know that they've got 10 hours to do this part, so that when they get halfway through and they realise they're at 7 hours, somebody somewhere has to say, I don't know if I'm being slow here, or if this is more complicated than we thought. I'm not saying every hour has to be accounted for, because there has to be a degree of flexibility, and we don't always know how projects are going to turn out. But being really clear up front with the team, what's expected of them, what their deliverable looks like, and how much time they've got to contribute, so that they can help the project manager or the account manager know.
That's about process and routine in terms of having those meetings and stuff, but it's also about culture as well, isn't it? So people actually, because you can only put so much process in place before you micromanaging and holding people down. So sometimes it's also about creating a culture where people actually understand the importance of doing that stuff and want to do it.
But it's empowering them as well. So if we all know if you've got all day to get something achieved, you'll make it last all day. Where if somebody knows they've got 10 hours to do it, then they'll work to those 10 hours. Otherwise, alternatively, it can just be dragged out because there isn't a focus on the end game.
It should never end in.
Yeah. I think moving on from that, it's logging of time. You have to be tracking time. You have to be able to access that time in relatively real time as well. Checks and balances along the way. We're a quarter of the way through the project, but we're showing 40% of the budget's worth of time on it. Why? You might be training somebody, that might be expected. You might be happy to write that off. But if actually something's not going to plan, that's a flag that needs to be checked, and we need to be doing that regularly throughout it. And the account manager or project manager, whoever has the responsibility of owning the financials, they have to be checking in regularly as well and monitoring that. You cannot get to the end of a project and realise it's gone wrong. So that's an important thing to move through. Invoicing, are they invoicing on time? You know, have we invoiced up front? I'm amazed at how many agencies aren't actually invoicing at sign off of a project, even ones that have got third party costs involved. You have to get that in. And then I'd also just say, you know, a full reconciliation. A lot of agencies aren't reconciling a project, so they finish it, they're happy, it's out the door, and they actually don't know whether it's profitable or not. And the danger isn't just in that and repeating that, but it's when you come to cost another similar project and you go back to the initial
which they're probably doing now,
proposal,
which is why they're not reconciling, because they're straight on to the next.
But you don't actually know that that project wasn't profitable or how profitable that project was, and you don't know where to change it. So looking properly at recoverability and profitability of every single project is important for me, because that also helps you know this might be a project we don't want to do again. For whatever reason, we might not have the right skill set, or it might be we've done tons of those projects and been profitable on them, but that client was a nightmare. That's not a client we want.
So it can be the type of project or service, it could be the people that were on it, it could be the client that's the problem, it could be one of a number of things.
But again, having that access to that wealth of data and being able to interpret it and look at it in different ways is really important.
Brilliant. In the bigger businesses that you worked for, you talked to me about the role of what you called a project accountant, or it was labelled a project accountant. Can you explain the purpose of that role and the responsibilities of the project accountant?
So I used to lovingly call the project accountant the enforcer. Worked very, very closely with the delivery teams. Didn't necessarily understood what we delivered. They don't need to. What they're looking at is the financial health of all those projects. So first and foremost, they're looking at the financial progress. You know, what's the revenue picture look like on a given project? How far through it are we? Does the time on the job reflect how far through the account manager's saying we are? You know, what could we actually recognise in terms of revenue if the project were to end today and the client were to pull out? Then they also look at variances. Where are there kind of discrepancies in the figures? Have we invoiced? Are we at any risk because we haven't invoiced? Is it time to prompt an invoice? Age debt, looking at all of that. So really looking at the financial health, and they're a good partner for your account manager. They work together very, very closely. So that's a main function, but they also were great at providing tools to help with planning. So that might have been budget templates, or it might be some kind of resource templates that you might use if that's not all systemized. They were great for us as a senior management team in providing us with data and reports so that we could interrogate those to make informed decisions. So we'd get KPI reports from them, utilisation reports for staff, billable time reports, and all of that was really, really helpful. And then they'd also do a monthly business review meeting with every account manager. So where they would sit through line by line and go through every project and go just through all of those questions. Let's look at the revenue. Is that still right? How far through are we? Last month you said we'd be 60% through this month. Where are we?
And that's a big part of it, isn't it? Because as with any role, it's the technical skills that come with that role, but it's also the accountability, because someone's got to hold you to account to making sure that those things get discussed, reported on, addressed, and it's not like we were too busy last week to do the project reconciliation. No, the accountant's job is to make sure that happens no matter what's going on.
Definitely.
Great. What are the project management disciplines that you advise? So I'm referring to the routines, the meetings, the things that happen on a regular basis, either throughout time periods, so throughout months or weeks, or throughout stages of a project.
Sure.
So what are they? When do they happen? Who should be involved?
Again, that will depend on the size of the project. It's very different to get 4 press releases out in the next month as opposed to do a whole e-commerce website. So that will very much depend on the size of the project, the number of people involved. the client and how the client wants you to interact with them as well.
Yeah.
So I think, the core disciplines for me would be the scoping, which we've talked about before, never to be done in isolation, always to be done with people who are contributing to the delivery of that. I've seen it where account managers said, well, I've done one of these before and I knew 3 days would be enough for that. Actually, you didn't quite understand this one enough. It's a bit more technical than you think. You really should have involved the programmer or the developer or somebody else in that and get their input.
So relying too much on experience and not looking at the data in front of you.
Yeah, and the data might not always be in front of them. Some of the more technical projects, I don't always think that an account manager might understand the detail of it and how intricate that might be.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that. I've been doing it for years and years and years. I still wouldn't go out and do... I have a gut feel of what I think a project might be worth. Yeah. And that's based on experience, but also based on the value I know the client puts on it. But I would certainly always involve the key people involved. Yeah. So that's critical for me, is get the scoping right first and foremost. I think, again, we talked about communication with the client. So the kick-off call, have that call with them, go through the proposal, be very clear on it, but also have a good understanding of how they want you to work. Do they want emails every day? I'd have clients who'd say, there's 8 people working on this project because it's such a big... I do not want emails from 8 people. I want one email from one person. Okay.
Are they, so those things there, you're obviously talking about how you can kind of comply with what the client wants, but how much does there need to be a balance of this is the way that we service our clients and creating consistency?
There does have to be a balance, but I think how you interact with your client is always flexible. That comment of, I want one email from one person. Yeah. Okay, it made a bit more coordination internally, but the same things were happening. It's just that every individual gave it through to one person who sent it through and said, this is what we need to know from you today.
And it was a reasonable request as well. It wasn't like an unfair...
No, I'm a massive believer in it has to work for the agency as well. You tie yourself up in knots, you might as well close the door and go home. It has to work for you. And I'm also a big believer in setting expectations for clients. I'm more than happy for you to tell me what your expectations are, but actually we've got some expectations of you and how you'll work with us as well. So you have to have a framework, because when people come back and complain or they've got a concern, then you've got something to go back to say, well, we talked about that, we understood how we were going to do it. Yeah. So back to the kick-off call, it's also, do they want status reports? What do they need to see? How often? Do they want emails? Do they want face-to-face meetings? How do they want to do it? Any of that's doable. It might take more time to get to see them than it would do to have a call. As long as they understand that takes more time and that takes more budget, then that's fine.
And that kick-off meeting doesn't need to be a long-winded thing, because I'd imagine some people watching this now will be thinking, well, they were £200,000 projects, whereas I'm doing £5,000 websites, but that doesn't change the fact that you should have a kick-off meeting.
It doesn't. If it's a £5,000 set of communications or some content, I would still absolutely... 15 minutes can do it. And it doesn't have to be face-to-face, a phone call. Most of my clients were international. So
and also just the perception from your clients that you do that you care enough to do a kick-off meeting is worth something,
Well, there's 100 ways to get to the wrong place if you don't actually define where that is. So it's really simple, just be clear. Then internal meetings throughout the project. So I would say, let's say weekly. It might be bi-weekly, depending on the size of the project. It might be less frequent than that, but I would definitely say a weekly meeting with the team. For me, if you're working on one project with a client, you probably don't need as many people. If you're working on multiple projects with a client, I'd have a representative of all of those in there, because the client sees you as one unit. So it's important that you kind of have an idea of what's happening as well. And it's also great for bargaining, because if they've asked for a load of work to be brought up on project A, then actually you can turn around and go, we can do that, but it's going to delay project B a little bit. So that's fine. So you need that kind of transparency internally. So I'd have definitely the account lead and key representatives of all the different sorts of functions that are putting into that, or skill sets that are putting into that project. A weekly call. Let's go through where we're at. Are there any challenges? What do we need to achieve this week? And update a status report after that meeting. And then the status report for me goes out to the client based on that absolutely current information.
So it's an internal meeting and then an external status report to the client.
So all of those people don't need to be part of the external meeting, depending on what you're needing to talk about at that point in time. So you'd have your account manager there, project manager, however you define it. and maybe a representative of whatever the kind of key action is that week, in case there's any particular questions that the account manager couldn't answer. So you go through the status report, everybody's clear on what's happening this week or for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. And how long does that meeting does it depend?
It could be a 15-minute. I believe you put them in the diary, and if they don't need to happen, you call up and say, we don't need that meeting this afternoon. Yeah. But actually getting that time in the client's diary is really important. Yeah. And also for the rest of the team.
Great.
And then I think also the critical one for me is just making sure that you've got an internal business review I've talked about before with the project accountant or anybody who's kind of managing those finances. You guys do management accounting. I'm sure you have similar type of calls with your agencies. So having the account manager as part of that, and then finally once it's done, you have to do a review call with your client. You have to go back and say what worked well, what didn't work well, what could we do differently, anything that we could do better, what were you pleased about, and that's where you get your testimonials as well, and that's where you get your good feedback. So you've got to learn from it, you have to act on it. You won't do it for every £5,000 project, but you certainly should do it for clients that you value, for projects that you think you'll do again.
That's an important one, isn't it? 'Cause that's what I think a lot of times people perceive this as being like reviewing people performance, which it can be, but often it's about reviewing our service performance, because what's happened in the past is a good reflection of what's going to happen in the future. So is this something we're equipped to do again?
You can review your people performance internally. You don't need your clients for that. I think the other thing I'd say as well, though, is in that kick-off call, depending on the size of the project, it sometimes is helpful for them to have a senior person that they can contact, or know that there's an escalation process if something's not going quite right. I think sometimes you find that clients don't always want to upset the account manager and vice versa, because they've got to work with them on this project. So not that it's about going over somebody's head, but it's just giving somebody the avenue to be able to go, I'm not quite happy with this, and then we can manage it properly. When it's weeks ago and it's festered, it's too late. So I'm a big believer in deal with it now.
So a lot of what we talk about at MAP with our clients is about the externally facing finance stuff, so the high level financials, as well as the client profitability and the project profitability and the people profitability is the month end accounts and the year end accounts. And we talk a lot about benchmarks and what sort of numbers people should be hitting, and the benchmark net profit, we believe from experience, is that you should be aiming for 20% plus in terms of net profit, probably about 50% in terms of gross profit. We're not seeing lots of agencies hitting those numbers, and a lot of agencies have started to become sceptical that those margins are still achievable in 2018 when there's competition from freelancers, other people setting up small agencies, internal teams, consultancy companies, etc. And they're starting to believe that there's more pressure on price and therefore on bottom line margins. However, you've worked in agencies that are regularly hitting those margins and are still doing that as of today. Okay, so talk to us about, now that you've started seeing and experiencing other businesses and particular agencies that are maybe not hitting those numbers, now that you've had some perspective to compare the two, because you probably didn't think about it when you were just working a successful business, what are the nuances, what are the things that you've noticed that have enabled those to be more higher margin than those?
I think I was reading something the other day about how agencies don't charge for certain services. So I've spoken to people who say, well, we don't charge for that kind of upfront consultancy, we just charge for the delivery. And I just think, why? Because the consultancy bit is the bit that makes what you're delivering so great. The delivery is the bit that's commoditized, that can be sent anywhere. Not only should you be charging for that, but that's where the premium is. That's what makes you great. That's why you are in existence to set up this great stuff. So I understand when people say it's hard. It is hard. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to plan for this, and you have to actually work at it. So anybody who thinks that operationally things are just going to fall into place, they're not. So if you haven't got somebody focusing on this, you need somebody doing it, whether it be part of somebody's role, depending on how big the business is. but none of this is an accident.
Yeah,
So
it's done strategically, it's planned that way.
Yeah. And then it's actually sustained. You have to, it's not a one-trick event, it has to happen over and over and over.
Do you think there's a link there as well between business development? Because often what's happening is an agency will receive a brief from someone who has the perception that they know what they want. So they're dealing with a client who feels that they've worked out exactly what they need their website to be or their communication speech to be, and they've come to the agency just to deliver it. Whereas actually, if you had a strategy of we want to help clients like this, and this, then you can go and find those clients and you can be more strategic in your conversations to help them to work out what you think they need, and you can get more involved. Does that make sense? More involved at a strategic level?
It does, and I'd argue that any client that comes to you and tells you I know exactly what I want, there's a respectful challenge that needs to be had there.
Yeah.
Because if you deliver what they want and it isn't actually what they need, the finger's going to be pointed at you when it doesn't work. So I think to protect yourself, you also need to be saying, you've obviously gone through a lot of work and energy to come to this.
Yeah.
Let us understand your thinking behind it so that we're in line with how you're thinking. It doesn't have to be a hard challenge, but I wouldn't take on any project without having gone through the due diligence myself to know that it's actually meeting the needs and the event out.
And also, as you said before, as you alluded to before, if all you're doing is taking the brief and just doing the job, then that's a commoditised service that can be done anywhere, and therefore the margins are extremely tight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot of value in those.
Yeah.
I think, but going back to your question, what works well or what should we be aiming to do? And this will be lots of different things here. But first is set your rates slightly higher than average and don't apologise for that. You're not average, you're better than average. You're going into a client feeling average, you're probably not going to win the business anyway. So believe in what you're doing and believe that you deserve a good payment for that.
And believe that it's not right for everyone.
No.
People are going to reject you on price.
Absolutely.
And that's normal business.
Absolutely, and I think that's my next point, is be selective with who you work with. There are some clients that aren't right for you and you're not right for them, and actually the sooner you find that out, the better.
And not just some clients, but the majority won't be right for you. If you found what you're really good at, then you're going after a smaller market, but you become famous in that market and you dominate that market.
But I guess there you're talking a little bit more about product offering. I'm saying even when you know who you are and what you offer, there will be clients that you choose not to work with.
Personalities.
So and on those rates, we should also annual rate reviews. Don't be afraid to do it. Everything else goes up. Why shouldn't you be paying more? Your salaries are going up. Your rent's going up.
And you're getting better.
And you're getting better
doing what you do.
Clients might argue that they should therefore see a benefit in that because you get quicker. But actually it's your expertise that they're paying for.
Yeah, and they're still getting value. Just because you've got quicker, if anything, they're getting more value. So why should they pay less?
Well, we agree on this. You shouldn't be. I think you need to build your budgets. I do believe in building your budgets on how long is it going to take, which people. But that gives you a number, and then there needs to be a gut feel that goes over that says, is that valuable? Is that fair? There's times where you'll cost something out and I'd have thought to myself, this is absolutely critical to my client. This is something that's way more valuable to them than maybe something else we're working on, and this is something that actually we can charge properly for and not straitjacket ourselves before we go in. I think clarity on offering, we've talked about that. Be really clear on what you do and what you do well, and know when to say no. Invariably you won't have the right skill sets in the business to do it well. You'll probably fall down and maybe not do the best job, and then your reputation is potentially ruined from doing that. Or you'll bring people in because you've got a chance to do this type of project, and then what do you do with them when you haven't got any more of those projects? So I think be really selective on what you do and know who you are and what you're offering. Plan your staffing needs. Know, based on the workload that you can see and your business development planning, when you're going to need people. And plan for when you bring those in. So, there'll be peaks of activity. You don't need full bodies for that. There's great freelancers and contractors out there. I'm a big believer in you use them for your peaks of activity. Book them well in advance, because that's when you get the best ones. To do that, you need to be operationally looking at your resource planning to know when you need them. Because you turn around and you need a freelancer tomorrow, chances are you're not getting the cream of the crop of freelancers. So plan all of your resourcing, plan in your hiring.
It's very stressful as well. If all you're doing is building your core team all the time, then you never have anything to show as a return, do you? Because every time you add that next head count, it's extra pressure to continue a higher and higher level of sales, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But there's a lag time. We know how hard it is to find good people, so you have to be constantly working at that and identifying who you need and when you need them, and plan to bring them in properly. Financial processes and controls, we've talked about that. If you're not capturing data and using data, then you are going to get surprises. So that's the only way to minimise those. Having the right resource, do the right work at the right time, at the right price. So we talked about rates. For me, I believe in it's a rate per role. At best, your bigger clients might push you to a tiered rate, where you've got maybe a senior, middle level, middle management, and a more junior rate. But I'd avoid it at all costs, and I would absolutely never work on a blended rate role, because I just think you've given so much away before you've even got out of bed when that's happening. And let's face it, the vast majority of what you do involves skill. The administrative stuff, which is where you're making money, is such a small percentage of the overall project that actually on most hours you're losing money. So for me, I wouldn't go down the blended rate role. I think it's, can you productize your revenue at all? Is there anything that you can do that's quite easy to offer to other clients, that's quite simple to deliver, so that it's revenue that's quite simple to get hold of, whether that's a product that you can sell or a service that you can plug in quite easily and have a really dedicated team of people doing that. That's great kind of general revenue. It's not, because a lot of what we do is bespoke. People want things and it's unique and it takes time and thought and process, and you don't always get paid for all of that scoping. Part of that's you showing your ideas and convincing a client that you're the right agency to work with. So you don't always get paid for all of that, but if it's a really simple type of solution or product or service that it's kind of turnkey, then that's great as well.
But just make sure there's enough demand for it before you go and invest in the time and money.
Well, I'm not always saying build something technology wise. It might actually just be a service as well.
Sure, but it still needs marketing, doesn't it? And it needs material and development and discussion, so you want to make sure that it's something that's got demand.
Yeah, agreed. I think cross-selling is also important, whether, I've worked in bigger agencies where we've had sister agencies that might have done different complementary services, so always being on the lookout for opportunities to introduce clients to other partners, so from the point of view of getting more volume from those clients and building that relationship. But in a smaller agency, that might be, if you're really clear on what you do and it's... you do web, but you don't do SEO. So you don't have to do SEO. Let's find somebody who does, and send the work to them, and vice versa. Make it a partnership and a relationship that works to you both. There can be financial rewards in doing that. But use your network and realise you don't have to offer everything, because you can't offer everything and offer it well.
The partnership bit's really important, because what I often see is, and I've actually experienced it myself as a business owner, but keeping it to agencies, is that sometimes the reason that you won't refer is because you want your client to be really well looked after. And so you're not just going to refer it to, if you're a web agency, you're not just going to refer it to an SEO agency who you met once at a networking event. You want to refer it to someone who you know is going to really look after your client, and you can trust them to look after them. So the partnership's important. You need to invest in those partnerships and 100% believe that that's someone you can trust, and they can trust you, and if you can create that reciprocal agreement, then
both ways. Yeah, definitely. I think organic growth for me is a big one as well. There's often so much more that we can do for clients. It is still within our remit that they don't know we do, and if we're not asking the questions as to what else might they be struggling with, or what are they going to do with this now that they've delivered it, or what are their plans around campaigning, whatever it might be, there's always something else that you can potentially help them with. So I'm a big believer in client action plans. Have a good handle on what are your clients' challenges, what are they trying to achieve, what does good look like, and really understand where you might be able to offer them other services.
Well, it's interesting actually. We had a client forward us an email recently with an embarrassed face on it, and he had sent a survey out to his clients, and I can't remember what the question that he asked was, but the response back from the client was, you should get better at selling to us, because you're really good at what you do and we trust you.
Yeah.
So tell us what you do and tell us what we can buy
You can
from
only
you.
say no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's, you know, it's quite simple really.
Yeah.
But if they don't know, and you know, I remember when I started an agency many years ago, and I was on a training course within the agency, and they did the Client 101 training, whatever it was, and took you through how what you're doing for that client is such a small part of their day. The 101 other things that they're dealing with that aren't related to the project, that consumes you, completely consumes you, but for them, it's one of 50 things they might be doing. So it's actually really understanding that they don't know you as well as you know you. So there's an opportunity there to educate them as well. And then finally, I think it's investing in your people. You know, you have to train, develop, empower your people so that they can actually go out and be on the lookout for business development opportunities, can flag something, even if it's just they mentioned this and I don't know if we do it, but let's talk about whether or not we can, because they're closest to your client.
Anyway, and they've just learnt a couple more things that reminded them that they need to sharpen up, and there'll be others that think, I don't know where to start, I'm doing very little of all of that, and now I realised how much I need to tighten things up, and it can be quite overwhelming for them.
Yeah.
Where would you recommend they you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, they can't do it all overnight. No. Where should they start? I imagine they've got very little of this stuff in place, and maybe they're a relatively young agency or a small agency. They've not got someone in charge of operations yet, or if they have, they may be a bit green and they've not worked in big agencies. They don't know what good looks like. Where should they start?
And I think that's an interesting one. I don't think many agencies would necessarily need an ops director permanently. You know, it's usually a significant salary, and it's there as a permanent headcount. So I'm not advocating that everybody needs an ops director.
Yeah.
They need somebody who's looking after this.
Sure.
Who can dedicate time to it. But if you know they've got some questions, I think it's a matter of saying, what are your pain points at the moment? What's not working well? Because you know the 2 or 3 things that are really keeping you awake at night.
Yeah.
There's probably 6 or 7 other things associated to that.
Sure.
But what are the 3 things that, even the one?
Yeah.
That's really
you already
bugging
know.
you?
Data helps, but really you already know
You know.
some things. Yeah.
And then it's so what's happening now, and what would the good look like? What is it you're trying to achieve, and why? Why do you want to improve this? So once we're clear on that, then it's, you know, it doesn't have to be with me. They can do this internally themselves. It's then a matter of saying, okay, let's look at what we know. What information have we got? What gaps have we got? What don't we understand? Work with the different people in the different departments within your organisation to say, what do you think about this process or this system or this issue, and how would you do it differently? Because you'll find they've got a lot of things that they'd probably suggest to you.
Yeah.
And then be really honest about how you go about improving it and putting some processes in place. Have somebody own it, whoever that might be, but own and be accountable for the process of change, and get some processes in place, educate the team, enthuse them and empower them and engage them to actually follow through.
Yeah.
And then measure.
Yeah.
If you're changing something for the better, you have to know what that looks like. So you have to have a way of being able to say, did we do well or haven't we done well, or are we on our way?
Yeah.
But then the other thing is, you know, you don't always know what you don't know. And I do think there is value from time to time of speaking to somebody outside your business who's just got a fresh pair of eyes, because sometimes it's, you know, you're completely clouded with what's going on every day.
I was just going to say that you're very British and very modest in saying it doesn't have to be me, but some people watching this will want to speak to you, or at least understand more about what it is that you do. So how do you do this? How do you fill this role for maybe smaller agencies where a full-time operations director doesn't make sense? Just talk us through that.
It can be a specific thing. It might be, we want to reduce turnover, you know, employee turnover or staff turnover. So then that's a matter of going in, having a consultation, a conversation with them. So that's just like the process I talked through there, but it's somebody to guide and challenge and ask those difficult questions along the way. So a real understanding of what the issue is, have some access to the people within their business. It might be some employee interviews, it might be just meeting with the senior managers. Really interrogate what they do currently, and they'll be doing some things really well, and finding where we can improve on that, or bring in some new templates or systems or training or whatever it might be. And then, you know, I can put together the plan that says you need to achieve this, or do this, and this, and I could walk away. I prefer not to, because if somebody's asking for help in the upfront bit, they probably haven't got the time, or maybe the skill set to implement it. I don't believe in coming in and giving somebody a sheet of paper that says, there's the 12 things you must do, or there's your processes. For me, it's working alongside the teams to help them facilitate, or I facilitate them to get to the right end.
So they get better at doing it ongoing.
But also so that they own it. You know, it's no good me coming in and saying, here's the 12 perfect steps to project management. I need to understand their business and know how they need to work and what their skill sets are, and maybe where they need some help and support. So I'll corral that, and we'll develop those together as a team, because when I go, I feel a little bit like Nanny McPhee, but when I go, you know, they need to own that and feel they're a part of the development, otherwise it goes in the bin. So that's on a project basis. Or there might be somebody who says, do you know what, I can't do this, it's not getting the attention it needs, I need somebody 2 days a week for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks to come in and help us get organised.
Sure, so and it allows the managing director to focus on business development, on strategy and vision, knowing that the money's not just coming in and leaking back out the other end. Good, brilliant. Good. Thank you very much, Karen.
Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today. Obviously, we're always looking to help our clients and our audience with people that have been there and done it in the agency world, and Karen's at the absolute top of her field and her area of knowledge. So I urge you to get in touch with myself or with Karen if you've got any more questions, and if there's anything we can help with, then let us know. Thank you.